Hey guys, what's good? Welcome back to JDB Selects. Round 3 officially in the books. No massive upsets this week. There were a couple, but certainly nothing like round 2. A couple of really ordinary games, and a very, very clear disconnect between the top teams and the lower teams. Although we are only 3 weeks in, so hopefully that gap does shrink as the season progresses. But anyway, before we get stuck into my tips and predictions for round number 4, let's as always look back at last week. So last week we tipped 6 out of 8 games. I think each week we've improved from round 1 4, round 2 5, and now round 3 6. I certainly didn't think the Sea Eagles could get it done at home without Tommy Turbo. I did, however, think that the Knights were a bit vulnerable to the Titans. I did tip off our Discord server that I think the Titans were going to get up, but obviously we can't change our tips now. But 6 out of 8, a great result, moving up that leaderboard and also moving our total yearly percentage to 63%. Obviously, we want to hit a few perfect rounds before the season's said and done, and I think we get a good chance to do that this week. Now, if you don't know by now, we do run a subscribers tipping comp. All the details to join are shown on screen now. 3 great prizes, free entry. I mean, why would you not join? If you are joining now, you are a wee bit behind the 8 ball, but that doesn't mean you can't still win. And speaking of winners, shout out to all of our top 20 tipsters as shown on screen. Plenty of good results across the board last week. Lots of 7s, a couple perfect rounds. So it's certainly starting to get tight at the top. So best of luck to everyone with your tips this week. Here are my personal tips and predictions for round 4. Alright, round 4 gets underway on Thursday night once again with the 11th placed South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the 12th placed Penrith Panthers at Accor Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Bunnies, they suffered their first defeat of the year as they were blown away by ravenous Cronulla Sharks outfit in the Shire, 27 points to 12. Souths weren't able to match the intensity and confidence Cronulla came with and found themselves behind by 20 points at the break. Their forward pack was dominated through the middle of the park, with none of the Rabbitohs forwards able to crack the 100 metre mark. While the stats certainly don't reflect it, Jai Gray was everywhere and seemed to be the only player for the Rabbitohs giving it his all, coming up with some huge effort plays on defence. The Rabbitohs fought back in the second half, with Jack Whiten scoring off a clever Cody Walker grubber, and Jamie Humphries adding another try from a quick tap penalty, but the damage was already done. After a relatively easy couple of opening rounds, the South Sydney Rabbitohs now face the 4-time defending premiers, who are coming off the back of back-to-back losses. In terms of teams list for Souths, Alex Johnston and Latrell Mitchell are edging closer to return. Johnston is expected to return in a few weeks from that Achilles injury, while Latrell Mitchell is eyeing a return in round 5 against his former club, the Sydney Roosters. And as for the Panthers, in a thrilling grand final rematch, the Panthers fell short against the Melbourne Storm, losing 30 points to 24 in a roller coaster encounter. The Panthers' resilience was on full display as they overcame an early setback when star halfback Nathan Cleary was ruled out just 7 minutes into the game due to a Category 1 concussion following a collision with Jerome Hughes. Despite falling behind 14-0 in the first 20 minutes, the Panthers clawed their way back into the contest, with Paul Elamotti scoring a double late in the first half to bring the score to 14-10 at the break. Despite the loss, the Panthers' completion rate was high, with only 1 error in the second half, something to be really proud of after their performance against the Roosters, and they really showcased their depth, with young stars Jack Cole, Paul Elamotti, Thomas Jenkins and Liam Henry stepping up and displaying their fighting spirit. Now, in terms of teams list for the Panthers, obviously big news, Nathan Cleary sidelined for at least another week after suffering that Category 1 HIA. Dylan Edwards also isn't expected to return until at least round 5. And Dane Laurie will be fighting to overcome his quad injury this week. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Panthers, they have won 12 of the last 14 games against the Rabbitohs. That includes 7 of the last 8. Penrith, they have also won 5 of the last 6 games at Accor Stadium since 2016. Pretty straightforward one to start Thursday night. I do think the Panthers win, regardless of if they have Cleary or Edwards. They certainly showed last week against the competition favourite Melbourne Storm that they have plenty of resilience, fight and points in them, even with their big stars on the sidelines. And the Bunnies unfortunately have had a relatively easy start to the season, but I think they get a pretty swift reality check that they are still a wee bit off the pace. So for me, Penrith win, but just by 1 to 12 points. Alright, moving now to the first of 2 fixtures on Friday, starting first with the 14th placed Sydney Roosters taking on the 9th placed Gold Coast Titans at Allianz Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Chooks, they fell short against the New Zealand Warriors, losing a low-scoring game, 14 points to 6, and ending their 7-year winning streak against the Auckland-based side. The Roosters' attack struggled to penetrate the Warriors' defence, managing only one try through prop Nafahu White in the 22nd minute. I thought the Roosters looked pretty fatigued from the week prior, plus the trip across the Tasman. Losing Connor Watson on the stroke of halftime also had an effect in the second half, and their left edge in particular came up with some pretty ordinary plays to bomb what looked to be certain tries, and the Sydney-based outfit wasn't able to get any value from their halves, Sandon Smith and Chad Townsend. The Roosters will need to regroup quickly as they face the challenge of bouncing back from yet another defeat, which sees them slip to 1-2 to begin the 25 season. And as we just mentioned, in terms of teams list for the Chooks, Connor Watson was unable to return to the field after succumbing to that Category 1 HIA, so his return is still yet to be decided. Lindsay Collins was also a late withdrawal last week, but should come back into the top 17 this week. And as for the Gold Coast, they rebounded back from their round 1 loss to secure a convincing 26-6 point victory over the Newcastle Knights at Cbus Super Stadium on Saturday night. The victory marks a successful turnaround for Des Hasler's men after their disappointing start to the season. It's pretty incredible what Tino Fasua-Malaawi brings to that side, with the captain racking up 140 run meters through 17 hit-ups and leading the way through the front. Jaden Campbell also had some really good moments, scoring a try to offset a few of his poor fifth play options. The other standout for me was Bo Fermor, who crossed the line in the 56th minute despite having 3 Knights players trying to hold him up, yet some way he found a way to get the ball down. Certainly a great bounce back from the Titans, who showed much improved defence, something Des Hasler will be hoping they can replicate week in and week out. Now, in terms of teams list for the Gold Coast, Alofiana Camperera was unavailable this week due to a hamstring injury and will be monitored again this week, while Jamin Jolliffe is also TBC with a calf injury keeping him on the sidelines for the time being. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Roosters have dominated the Titans for quite some time, winning 13 of the last 14 meetings, including the last 11 games straight. This will, however, be the first time they've met at the new Allianz Stadium, but the record prior was 2 wins apiece at the old stadium. Oh man, this is an absolute danger game if you ask me. I think the Roosters have the forward pack to match the Titans. The Titans, I think, certainly have the more electric pace and speed in the outside backs. It's really whose halves will stand up. Can Townsend lead the Chooks around, or can Campbell do that for the Titans? That, to me, will be the difference, because I think they have, pros and cons across the park. I'm going to take the Roosters by 1-12. I'm going to back the stats. But there is certainly no confidence in that tip, and if you are in our Discord server, if I do make a change, you will be the first and only place to know about it. I'm going to flip and flop on this game all week. Sorry, guys. Alright, and the final game on Friday night should be an absolute cracker. Well, it's the Battle of Brisbane, with the 15th place Dolphins taking on the 4th place Broncos at Suncorp. Starting first with the Finns, they produced their best 60 minutes of football all year, only to fall away in the final 20 minutes, suffering their 3rd consecutive loss of the season to the West Tigers, 18 points to 30. Despite the strong start that saw them leading 18-12 at halftime, the Dolphins were unable to maintain their momentum in the second half, with fatigue setting in through the middle of the ruck in particular. Cody Nikorima had the hot hand in the first 40, but completely disappeared in the second, with the Finns unable to add to their halftime tally, and Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow once again failed to have an impact on the contest, looking unenthused and reserved for the 3rd week running. The loss has also intensified concerns about the so-called Bennett curse, as new coach Christian Wolf struggles to fill the shoes of his predecessor, and many have early crowed the wooden spoon, and to be honest, it is hard to argue against. Now, in terms of teams list for the Dolphins, no new injuries, so there shouldn't be any injury force changes. However, Christian Wolf might need to start making some performance-based ones. And as for the Broncos, they emerged victorious in the latest Queensland derby against the North Queensland Cowboys, securing a 26-16 point win at Suncorp. Payne Haas was once again incredible, scoring an impressive 4-pointer and racking up 210 running meters with 68 post contact. Despite showing glimpses of their best and completing at a much higher rate, they did make double-digit errors, with fullback Reece Walsh coming up with half of them. I'm sure Michael Maguire would be somewhat happy with the defensive effort they showed to turn away the Cowboys regularly and limit the damage of their unforced errors, and the win certainly solidifies the Broncos' position in the top half of the ladder, but there is still plenty of room for improvement. Now, in terms of teams list for the Broncos, Katoni Staggs was included in the wider squad last week, but couldn't quite overcome his calf complaint. He'll likely be listed again and monitored throughout the week. And looking at the two sides head to head, there's only been 4 battles of Brisbane to this point, and the Dolphins finally broke through to get their first win late last year, with the Broncos winning the first 3 installments. I think the Dolphins probably get up for this game, but I do think the Broncos will be too strong. So for me, I'm going to take the Broncos just by 1 to 12 points, because I don't love what I've seen from the Broncos nor the Dolphins, but both sides should be ready for a big game given the circumstances. Alright, moving now to the first of 3 games on your Super Saturday, starting first with the 13th placed St George Illawarra Dragons hosting the first placed Melbourne Storm at Netstrata Jubilee Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Dragons, they had their first bye of the season last week. However, the week prior were unable to close out the game against the Rabbitohs, narrowly losing 24 points to 25. The Red V dominated much of the game and held a 24 to 12 point lead with just over a quarter remaining before allowing the Bunnies back into the contest through poor game management. The Dragons' attack was pretty potent, to be fair, with Tyrell Sloan, Kyle Flanagan and Christian Tuipolotu, the money man himself, crossing the stripe, but defensively they let themselves down. Unfortunately for Saints fans, Lachlan Ilias has certainly struggled so far in his return to first grade and will be desperate to put in a good performance, or his place in the starting side could be in jeopardy. Now, in terms of the teams list for the Dragons, Moses Sully left the field during the second half with a rib injury, so will certainly be in doubt this week, while Big Ben Murdoch-Masila is listed to return from a Liz Frank injury this week. And as for the Storm, they edged out the Penrith Panthers in a thrilling high-intensity grand final rematch at Amy Park, 30 points to 24. The Storm capitalised on an early penalty to score within the first 5 minutes through Grant Anderson, setting the tone for what would be a quality, fast-paced game. Momentum flipped multiple times throughout the match, with Cameron Munster orchestrating much of the Storm's attack, earning him Player of the Match honours, while Stefano Uta-Ekumanu also impressed with 135 running metres. The win avenged Melbourne's grand final loss to the Panthers last year and showcased their ridiculous dominance at home, where they've now won 22 of their last 24 matches. Now, in terms of teams list for the Storm, some huge news came out the following day that Jerome Hughes did suffer a broken hand in the first half but played through the pain. He's undergone the knife and will be sidelined for a couple of weeks. Nick Meaney was also a casualty of some friendly fire courtesy of Nelson Asafa-Solomona, suffering a broken jaw and looks set to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Big Nas as well also won't be available this week after failing an HIA after the match. Looking at the two sides head to head, Melbourne have won 5 of the last 7 games against the Red V. They're currently locked at 3 wins apiece at Netstrata Jubilee, but the Saints have won 3 of the last 4. There's certainly a few stats there that favour the Saints at Netstrata against the Storm, but I do think even without Hughes and Meaney and Nelson that they will be too strong. If you've got Munster, Grant and Pappenhausen in your side with the likes of Xavier Coates on the wing, they're a tough assignment for anybody. So for me, I'm going to take the Melbourne Storm 1 to 12. Alright, moving now to the second game on Saturday, we have the 16th placed North Queensland Cowboys taking on the 8th placed Canberra Raiders at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Cows, they now find themselves 0-3 to start the season after going down to the Brisbane Broncos 26 points to 16. The final 10-point margin probably flattered the Cowboys, who were largely outplayed for a significant portion of the game. Despite their winless start to the season, Jackson Purdue has been very impressive, and Murray Taulagi produced a brilliant finish in the corner to keep North Queensland within striking distance. However, errors and missed opportunities plagued the Cowboys as they struggled to match Brisbane's intensity through the middle. And while it might not have been the win for the Cowboys, you have to say it was certainly an improvement. In terms of teams list for North Queensland, I don't believe there were any new injuries, so we should see no injury-forced changes. And as for the Raiders, they were absolutely decimated by the Manly Sea Eagles, 40 points to 12. It was pretty shocking, to be fair, as they started that game really strong, regularly turning away Manly and even crossing the line first, only for the bunker to call it back for obstruction, but from that point on, it was all Manly. Kyle Week came up with a couple of unforced errors, and Corey Horsburgh was sin-binned for repeat infringements, and they never recovered. It was a stark contrast to the side that had won their opening 2 games of the season, and no doubt they would have been given a huge spray from Sticky. Big teams list news for the Raiders this week is Joseph Tapani, the captain, will be free to return from suspension this weekend. Alright, looking at the two sides head to head, the Cowboys have a really strong record against the Raiders in recent years, winning 7 of the last 8 games, including 6 straight. Canberra, they have only won 1 game at Queensland Country Bank Stadium back in 2020 and have lost 4 of their 5 games at the ground. Man, to me, this is a bit of another danger game this week. This game and the game between the Titans and the Roosters, are absolute danger games. You've got the stats that really don't favour the Raiders, and you've got a performance that they dished up the week prior. You've got the Cowboys who are starting to find a little bit of, I wouldn't say form, but something. Oh, it's going to be tough. But I am going to take the Raiders by 1 to 12 points. I think the Raiders forward pack should be the difference between the two sides. The Cowboys have looked pretty paper thin and lacked a lot of go forward from their big men, and especially with Tapani back on the side, I think that's a big tick in the Raiders box. So I'm going to go against the stats and take the Raiders 1 to 12. Alright, and the final game of Super Saturday has the 6th place Cronulla Sharks taking on the 2nd place Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs at Sharks Stadium in the Shire. Alright, starting first with the Sharks, who delivered a dominant performance in front of their home fans for the first time in 2025, securing a commanding 27 to 12 point victory against the South Sydney Rabbitohs. A blistering first half display saw the Sharks race out to a 20-0 lead, leaving the Rabbitohs struggling to recover. Nico Hines opened the scoring in the 3rd minute with a sharp dummy and run, followed by Brenton Nickera's try off a well-timed Hines pass just a few minutes later. The Sharks dazzled with 2 length of the field tries in the first half, finished off by Kyle Ero and Will Kennedy, showcasing just how balanced their roster is. Braden Trindle also combined perfectly with Hines, kicking 2 clutch 40-20s, scoring a try, and putting the icing on the cake with a field goal in the game's dying stages. Another great showing for Cronulla, who continue to firm as premiership contenders in 2025. Now, in terms of teams list for the Sharks, they lost both Braden Hamlin-Uele to a suspected medial ligament injury and Sivitalakai to an ankle injury, so both will likely be unavailable this week. And as for the Dogs, they edged out a slim 16 to 8 point win against arch rivals the Parramatta Eels to start their season with 3 straight wins for the first time since 2012. It was clear that the Dogs really missed the long kicking game of Matt Burton, and I think that meant they fatigued faster than normal. The performance was far from clinical, and there certainly wasn't a clear standout in my opinion, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think it really highlights the strong team culture that Cameron Ciraldo has created. Plenty of great defensive signs for the Dogs, even if their attack wasn't at its best last week. Now, in terms of teams list for the Doggies, still no firm return dates for both Burton and Kikau, but it certainly won't be this week. Jacob Kiraz, however, is listed to make his first appearance of 2025 this week if selected by Cam Ciraldo. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Sharks have won 12 of the last 15 games against the Doggies. That includes 6 of the last 7. Sharks Stadium has also been a happy hunting ground too, winning the last 5 home games against Canterbury. Pretty straightforward for me. I think the Sharks win again at home, but defensively the Dogs are pretty solid, so I'm just going to take Cronulla by 1 to 12 points, but also wouldn't be surprised if they score a few tries late to blow the margin out. Alright, moving now to the first of 2 games on Sunday this week, starting first with the 3rd placed Manly Sea Eagles taking on the 17th, aka last placed Parramatta Eels at 4 Pines Park. Starting first with Manly, who unleashed an avalanche of points on the poor old Canberra Raiders to round out round 3, cruising to a 40 to 12 point win. Both sides were locked in an arm wrestle for the opening 20 minutes before the sin-binning of Corey Horsburgh opened the floodgates. Manly saw an absolutely eye-watering and mind-blowing 77% of possession in that first half and ran riot on the right edge, heading into the sheds 30 points to 0. Daly Cherry Evans' fitness was obviously a hot topic heading into the match, but the wily veteran was at his damn near best, combining seamlessly with Hamoli Olukuatu and Ruben Garrick off the back of a strong performance from their forward pack. A massive and major bounce back from the Sea Eagles, who weren't able to spread their wings in Auckland the week prior. Now, in terms of teams list for Manly, both Tom Trbojevic and Lachlan Croker should, and keyword should, be ready to go this week, but keep an eye on teams list on Tuesday. And unfortunately, Taniela Paseka left the field with a ruptured Achilles, which obviously ends his involvement this year. And as for Parramatta, should we give them another week off? Now, look, to be honest, there was certainly an improvement defensively from the Eels this week, but they lacked any creativity or threat on attack. The only positive for me was Zach Lomax, who left everything on the park, clocking up just shy of 300 run meters and competed on absolutely every play in high ball. I'm certainly interested to see what happens when Mitchell Moses returns, but unfortunately that isn't going to be until around round 7 or 8, and by that stage their season could well and truly be over. GG Eels, GG. And in terms of teams list, both Bailey Simonson and Jake Tungall should be available for selection this week. Looking at the two sides head-to-head, Parramatta have won 4 of the last 6 games against Manly. However, the Sea Eagles have won 5 of the last 6 against the Eels at 4 Pines Park. Pretty straightforward one for me this week. I think Manly win and probably win well again. I'm going to take Manly 13+. Alright, and the final game of the round, aka the game of the round, is on Sunday, wrapping it up. The 5th placed West Tigers taking on the 7th placed NZ Warriors at Campbelltown Sports Stadium. Alright, starting first with the Tigers, who staged a remarkable comeback to secure a 13 to 18 point victory over the Dolphins in their round 3 clash at KO Stadium. Trailing 18-12 at halftime, the Tigers mounted an impressive second half performance, holding the Dolphins scoreless while piling on 18 unanswered points. Jerome Luai continued to build his combination with young 5'8" Lockie Galvin, setting up Tino Taruva's first try with some silky ball playing, and veteran hooker Api Coruscant proved instrumental in sealing the win with an absolutely ridiculously good dummy half try in the closing stages. That was chef's kiss. The Tigers' defense continues to impress me, as they've now only conceded 34 points in the opening 3 rounds. That's just over an average of 11 points per game, which is pretty bloody good if you're a Tigers fan. And in terms of teams list for the Tigers, the win was overshadowed with them losing both Gerald Skelton and Samuela Fainu late, who is probably, in my opinion, one of the best on ground. So a pretty big loss this week if they both are unavailable. And as for the Warriors, they secured their second win of the season, grinding out a gritty 14 to 6 point win over the Sydney Roosters, a side they hadn't beaten since 2018. Now, it certainly wasn't the most entertaining game of football. However, the Warriors showed plenty of composure to stick to the game plan and restrict the Chooks to just a single try. Fullback Chance Nickel-Klugstad was instrumental in the victory, amassing a ridiculous 314 metres, while Ali Liatawa scored 2 crucial tries that proved to be the difference in the end. Despite the win, it felt like the Warriors had the lion's share of possession, but struggled to convert that into points, something I think they struggled with previously last year as well, often running the ball on the last tackle or dropping off short balls on the inside, cutting back against the grain, which just didn't really threaten. A gritty performance nonetheless, but still plenty of improvement if they are to start to challenge the top teams. Now, in terms of teams list for the Warriors, massive out with RTS suffering a hamstring injury in the second half and looks to be set for a few weeks on the sidelines. Alright, looking at the two sides head-to-head, the Warriors have won 7 straight against the Tigers. However, the Tigers have won 4 of the last 5 games between the two clubs at Campbelltown. Ooh, now this is an absolute tough game to tip, morally and just in general. I think the Tigers have their tails up right now. There's a lot of confidence in that group. They've now won 2 on the bounce. And the Warriors are in a similar boat. They've shown that the Vegas performance was just a one-off and they can beat some of the bigger, more established clubs. But you know what? It's my birthday on Sunday, and I'll be goddamned if I don't tip the Warriors against the Tigers on my birthday. So I'm going to take the Wars here, 1-12. But I certainly do think the Tigers have a good chance as well. Alright guys, bang, just like that. 4 weeks of the season done and dusted. Well, actually 5 weeks if you count Vegas. Pretty crazy. Thank you as always for watching. If you are still here and listening, hit that subscribe button, leave a like on the video, let me know who you are tipping in the comments down below, and I'll see you next week bright and early Monday morning.